The City Council special meeting will now come to order. Madam Clerk, if you would please provide the chamber emergency evacuation plan announcement followed by the intro of the legislation.
Council chamber emergency evacuation. Upon activation of the emergency alarm signal, all persons should immediately exit the building. Please use the exits to the left or right front of the council chamber or the east or west stairwell outside the rear doors of the chamber. Do not use elevators or escalators. After exiting the building, security will direct everyone down 9th Street to the assembly area located inside the former public safety building parking lot. Able persons should assist visually and hearing impaired visitors with exiting the building. And Madam President, all members of council are in attendance this evening except for Mr. Breton, Ms. Robertson, and Ms. Trammell, and you do have a quorum.
Thank you.
And Madam President, I will read the announcement relative to the introduction of papers for this afternoon. Members, the list of legislation for introduction this afternoon, consisting of 3 resolutions, has been provided to you, and such legislation is hereby introduced. A copy of the list is currently available for public inspection at the rear of the council chamber, and an electronic copy of the list and the full text of the legislation will be available on the city's website by no later than Wednesday, November 12th. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. With that information, the agenda for this meeting has been completed. The meeting now stands adjourned. Thank you. Okay. Again, good afternoon. The Organizational Development Standing Committee of the Richmond City Council will now come to order. And Mr. Clerk, if you would handle the approval of the minutes for us, please.
Madam Chair, the minutes to be approved are from the Monday, October 6th, 2025 Organizational Development Standing Committee meeting. If there are no corrections or amendments, then the minutes will be approved as presented. Those minutes have been approved.
Thank you. Then we will move on to reports for this evening, starting with the Richmond Region Tourism Annual Update. And I think we have those packets before us, and that will be followed by the legislative 2026 General Assembly legislative session agenda item, and then the presentation by our CAO on the federal government shutdown impact update. Welcome, Ms. O'Donnell.
Thank you, Madam President, members of council. It's a pleasure to be with you all again this year for the annual tourism update and bringing forward the good news of regional tourism in our destination. So we just got our numbers in last month for 2024, and more than 18 million visitors spent nearly $4 billion in our region, which is an increase of nearly 5%. So we are having a terrific trend in tourism, and this fiscal year is continuing the same. When we think about tourism in our community, yes, it's an economic driver. Yes, it provides jobs and taxes, but it's also a force for good in our community. And that's really our vision at Richmond Region Tourism. And I want to start off by saying how thrilled we are with the Allianz Amphitheater and the addition to the City of Richmond's portfolio for tourism assets. It's been such a driver. It's been great to hear from the folks over there that in some cases, more than 50% of the attendees are coming from out of state. And we are working closer than ever with economic development about how best to leverage that as a tourism asset for our clients and for our media as they come to town. So congratulations on a great win for the tourism industry in the city. As you all know, we have a regional approach to tourism, 7 localities. We've been doing this regional approach for more than 40 years because we know that visitors do not understand county and city lines. They're traveling all over our region, spending their money in all corners of our region, and it makes so much sense to come together as a region and promote the variety of resources across our 7 localities. Specifically in the city, tourism spending is up 8.2% for calendar year 2024, generating $51.2 million in local taxes and supporting nearly 9,000 jobs for our friends and neighbors in the city. When we think about tourism, there are kind of 2 buckets. One is leisure travel, which we'll talk about, and then one is group business. And when we look at group business that Richmond Region Tourism works to recruit, the large majority of that is sports tourism. And for the city of Richmond, your flagship sports tourism destination is the convention center. We actually hosted USA Boxing, which is pictured here last December, which was the first time an event, an awesome piece of business for December, which is often quiet, and a very high profile event for Richmond. We have fencing and field hockey and volleyball and basketball and all kinds of sports happening in the convention center. And those people are spilling out into the downtown area and staying downtown and spending money. When we look at some other highlights, it's not just sports. In the last year, we hosted AKKA, GalaxyCon Nightmare Weekend, as well as GalaxyCon Traditional Weekend, Field Hockey I mentioned, and then the AKA conference. And all of these were in the thousands of attendees, generating $1 to $2 to almost $3 million in economic impact. When we look at what Richmond Region Tourism has helped to recruit to the city specifically, it's in the last fiscal year, it was 80 meetings and conventions and 19 sporting events. And you add that together and it's roughly $70 million or more in economic impact spent by those visitors here in our community. We could do better. I can't stand here before you and not mention that we could do better with a headquarter hotel. Since January of 2019 through September of 2025, we have lost 238 events who were looking at Richmond, talking to us, considering us because of the lack of a headquarter hotel adjacent to the convention center. So that's almost 421,000 room nights and $337 million in economic impact that did not happen in our community because of the lack of that hotel. In addition, we're feeling the pressure in the north and to the south. So Kalahari is being built in Spotsylvania. It will be a 900-room property with an enormous amount of exhibition space. And pictured here is the Raleigh, North Carolina's 500-room headquarter hotel that's underway that will be opening in 2027. So we are anxiously hoping that more progress can be made on that front. We are able to secure some business, though, and using the TID, if you recall, the Tourism Improvement District gives us more assets to work with. And these are some examples of events that we've been able to recruit for the city using the TID. One of the most exciting ones is called TBEX. This will be coming in June of next year. It stands for Travel Bloggers Exchange. And there will be 500 content creators, bloggers, and influencers coming to Richmond for a conference and dozens of tours around our community. They were here for a site planning visit a couple of weeks ago, and I got even more excited about this because it's very clear that their whole mission is to get out and dig into our community. We had someone from Huntsville who had hosted them years ago who said that their town is constantly saying, please bring them back, please bring them back. So there's going to be so much buzz from these folks being here next June and exploring all of Richmond. The TID also enables us to be able to advertise year-round and always be on. So we continued our Speaks for Itself campaign through the end of the year, which generated 33 million in impressions. We do advertising on all platforms. These are some campaigns that are funded specifically through the TID. And for Richmond, these are the results, generating $4.4 million in economic impact. And again, we're trying to drive hotel room nights with a variety of campaigns to attract visitors to spend their money. One of the most, I think, coolest ones we did in the last year, and a little bit different, was that for World Pride, we hosted an event in town where we meeting planners and journalists here. And then we took them to DC for World Pride and wrapped cars through a program called Carvertise that are used as Uber and Lyft. And so they picked up our clients, but then they were in DC for 8 weeks, driving around with the Richmond Region message on their car. And some people who were picking up Ubers were riding around in basically billboards with wheels around DC. And they actually did 2 swarm events at the Beyonce concerts where all of them converged together and made a Richmond splash in DC, which is one of our largest feeder markets for visitation. We're also looking at trying to reach travelers while they're in the airport to show them what there is to do and see here. This is an example of some of the signage we're able to put up inside the airport. And we have billboards. They're going from North Carolina up to Northern Virginia and around town. There's probably a dozen different ones, but a couple of them are here. So you can see, again, just raising the profile of what there is to see and do in the Richmond region. It's also important for other people to be talking about how cool we are, not just ourselves. So media relations is really important to our team, and we work really hard to work with major publications. And here's a couple examples of major media outlets that have covered the Richmond region in the last year, from Southern Living to CNN to Travel Pulse. And The Independent, another Travel Pulse, and Probe the Globe. Again, we want other people talking about how great we are. We also need to talk about ourselves. And so our team works on blogs and all kinds of content throughout the year. Here's just a sampling of the 20 plus blogs that we did in the last year, all featuring Richmond, anything from holiday gift giving to the outdoors to inspire people to travel here. We also hosted influencers who come here and explore our region and then post on their outlets. And some of the ones that we hosted had over 55,000 engagements on their channel. So it's a great way to expand the reach and get a third-party endorsement of what a great place it is to visit. And of course, we're always wanting to connect with visitors when they are here. So we have visitor information booths set up at major events like the Folk Festival and Dominion Energy River Rock. We have Visitor's Guide, which is in your packet. We work with Visitable also to help our attractions be more accommodating to accessible travelers. And we're also working on recruiting group tours to the region. We have a series of trails that are digital trails that we have launched over the years that are sort of a gamified way to explore the region. And we are launching one for Richmond Region 250, which we all know it's the 250th next year, which will be the Revolution Trail, to go along with our tagline for that campaign, which is Richmond Region 250, always revolutionary. So that will launch in January, and we'll be holding a webinar to inform the community on that. We also have a very interesting and unusual program for our clients who bring meetings here where we can offer to offset their carbon footprint through a net zero emissions program. So with that, I'd like to invite Danielle Fitzhugh, who's our Vice President of Community Relations, to come talk to you about a few more of the community programs we have.
Thanks, Catherine. Good afternoon, Council. As Catherine mentioned, all the visitors that are coming here and the work we're doing to get the word out to come to the Richmond region, on our community relations team, we're working to make sure that all of our partners are ready for the visitors when they get here through education, workforce development, diversity initiatives, and grant making. With our I Am Tourism program, which is our signature education program throughout the region, we've educated over 460 community residents throughout the region, and also had an activation for the past 2 summers at VCU, having 650 students and families come through an education of things to do in our region and how to get involved while they're here on campus outside of the campus environment. We also launched our digital I Am Tourism program. So if you can't come to an in-person class, we have a digital platform where they can take a 90-minute, an hour to 90-minute Blackboard version and get exposed to everything there is to do throughout the Richmond region. Workforce development, we just completed a couple weeks ago our 3rd Mission Tomorrow, taking 8th graders through what it means to be in the hospitality and tourism industry. This example is we had a food truck with the chef on site to talk about what it is to launch a business as a chef and then meet the community where there are at our various festivals throughout the region. Coming up soon in January, we have our RVA Sports Awards. This program allows us to do some grant making to our sports community that's here in market, hosting tournaments themselves. Our key celebrity speaker is Brianna Scurry. She's a U.S. National Olympic goalie for the U.S. team, and she'll be with us in January as well, and we'll hold that over at the Altria Theater. Our annual meeting takes place in May, and this is where we highlight our partners and community that are doing great things to make this region really the best place to live. Our Black RVA program, we hosted our second annual Black RVA Community Awards at the Hippodrome Theater. We have 8 awards that we give out throughout the community. It was by far over 300 people. We packed the Hippodrome, and we can't wait to bring it back next August. Out RVA, as Catherine mentioned, we had our Proud Voices fam, our Out RVA partners, partnered with our sales team to make sure that the experience here of showing the Richmond region the inclusive place that it is was amazing. And it concluded with a Pride Ride takeover of Amtrak, where we took our partners and planners to DC for World Pride. These are just a few pictures of the community relations and senior team out in community, making sure that we're meeting the needs, answering questions, and being available to help highlight where they may have questions for us. And I'll leave you with our video, our second multicultural video. Let's see if we can get this to play.
So I'll just wrap up by saying it's an honor for our team who loves this community so dearly to be the ones that get to share it with the world and bring people here to fall in love with it too. So with that, we'd be glad to answer any questions that you have.
I'll take questions, but I just have to say, wow. Mr. Breton, you started what I think should be the case, and we just want to give you a round of applause.
Thank you so much.
So
Thank you.
thank you so much. The incredible accomplishments, the tourism, the visitor number that generated the significant revenue, extraordinary. Just wanted to say congratulations and to applaud the incredible effort of Richmond Region Tourism under both of your, certainly under your leadership, and with more to come.
Thank you.
Members, are there questions or comments? Sorry. Vice President Jordan.
Thank you so much. I just had a quick question. You noted spending was up 8.2% for 24.
Yes.
Do you have a sense for where we are this year? Thanks.
You know, it's sadly the spending takes a long time to come out. So we won't get that data until just under a year from now for visitor spending. But we do look at a lot of other metrics, and hotel occupancy is the easiest one that gives us an idea of how we're doing. And in this fiscal year, both July and September were record-breaking years. So we're talking 12% year-over-year growth in revenue for hotel occupancy. So I would therefore deduce the numbers are going to be very good, but we won't have the actual data for a while. Thank you. Yes.
Sorry, Councilmember Lynch.
First of all, thank you. Awesome work. Love that ad. Love all the really cool work that you're doing to promote what we all know, which is RVA is amazing. Richmond's amazing. I remember passing the TID, the Tourism Improvement District, but I don't recall, and this is just my own ignorance, like how are you all funded and what portion does Richmond pay versus the other localities? And if so, is it equal share? Like how is your ongoing
Sure.
funding sustainable and who's paying for it?
Yes. The good news is the visitor pays for it. So the Richmond Region Tourism is funded by the hotel occupancy tax, and it's 2% of the tax. So Richmond, Hanover, Henrico, and Chesterfield contribute 2% of the equivalent of 2% of their tax from the previous fiscal year to Richmond Region Tourism. And then the TID is another 2% fee that's collected in real time. So they're basically the same amount, but a little bit different because it's a different year.
And they, at what portion, I mean, I would imagine, this is maybe a brash assumption, but does the city pay for a larger portion of occupancy tax to fund?
Well, everybody's portion is 2%, so that part's the same. But if you look in your annual report, there's actual pie charts for both the TID and Richmond Region Tourism that show the percentage. Henrico's is the highest because they have the most hotel rooms. So because it's based on the occupancy tax and the number of rooms, they end up contributing more. And then Chesterfield has a few more than Richmond, but Richmond's rate is often higher. So kind of depends on those factors, the number of rooms, the rate charged, and typically the rate in the city is higher.
Councilwoman Robertson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to commend you for the great work and your total team for the work that you're doing. You make Richmond an exciting place to be. I mean, the film is exemplary of everything that we have to offer in this region, and we really appreciate the work that is consistently being done to attract people to this region. And I just want to thank you for the work. It's a privilege to serve on the board. And I learn a lot from you guys as to what the hard work that has to be invested and the creativeness and innovative way that you go about doing it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your service for so many years.
Again, thank you.
Thank you.
Extraordinary job. Greatly appreciated. Look forward to the next year's excitement. I don't know how you're going to beat that, but look forward to it.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. With that, members, we will proceed with what will be the next agenda item. We're switching just a little bit, and we will ask Ms. Devin Cabot to join us relative to the 2026 General Assembly Session Legislative Agenda, the draft. Welcome, Devin.
Thank you, Madam President, members of council. You should have in front of you a copy of the legislative agenda. The most recent draft, I think, is the second version of the draft, but we've gone through many iterations in between. And I'm mostly here just to answer questions and to kind of provide you with an update as to where we are. Of course, we were not able to have our lunch that we were going to have with the state delegation because of the special session last week. So my plan at this point is to meet with each member of the delegation individually. I've had some initial conversations, but now that we have a little bit better sense, all the different positions on the agenda, I'm going to meet with each of them individually and kind of gauge their interest on both items in our agenda, but also things that they're thinking about that could potentially impact the city. It's always a good idea to have a two-way conversation with them and kind of get feedback on what they're working on, as well as sharing the priority positions of the city. And so that's sort of our next step. Of course, we will know a lot more about what is to come in 2026 tomorrow at 9 p.m. when the polls come back, and we can start to kind of think about what the makeup of the General Assembly will look like, what the new administration will look like, and kind of have a more strategic plan of attack once we know those things are kind of more set in stone. So are there questions I could answer for council?
Members, do we have questions at this point? Councilmember Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the update. I think that what I'm curious about is just the process. You mentioned other drafts, and I think just for the public's awareness, it would be helpful to understand what that looks like. In I, looking ahead to next year, I'm looking to perhaps review our rules and procedures or our code process to bring more visibility into the process. And where that starts from, I was speaking to a constituent recently who has interest in policy at the state level that impacts our forestry and the maintenance of trees in the city. And I think this person, they reached out to a member of the local delegate who explained that in order for them to be able to support it, it would have to be identified as a priority by this body. And so she was inquiring what that process looked like. And I wasn't able to clearly explain what that looks like. And so I appreciate that, that there is, I appreciate that the word inclusionary is in the document now. That was something that I brought up at the last meeting. I do think that the language is somewhat, I don't know, I don't want to say vague, but it's not specific to advocating for it specifically in Richmond. But ultimately, I think my bigger focus is looking ahead, how we can pull the public into this process, how we can ensure that the public has a clear understanding of where we all sit on these various items. So if there are folks that are essentially patroning the prioritization of certain pieces of legislation, I think that's important for the public to have visibility to that. So I just wanted to essentially open the door for any thoughts that you might have or council members on bringing more transparency to the process. And also the timeline, I guess, that you would recommend to do that. My gut thinks that, to have this document finalized in October would probably make sense. But yes, so, I think ultimately what I'd like to see is a document where there are the names of the patrons on them, because we are public officials, and I would like to ensure that people know, where I stand and where we all stand, as we are making decisions that make, significant impact on the residents that we serve.
Sure. I can speak to the process to date to start, just how we got here today. So I've been here to help you craft the agenda for about 60 days now. I think before we brought the first version of the agenda to this committee, I had met with almost every member of council at that point. Subsequent to that, we have met with the mayor's office. We've started conversations with the delegation, and sort of all of that feedback. It's sort of an art more than a science, right? It's not based on specific numbers, but how many people are talking about what and how it all kind of fits together. I think there was an interest in making sure we had a well-rounded package and not just focus on any one or two issues, but that the concerns and priorities of a lot of community partners, including RPS and others, were included in your package. That was, part of that process. As far as creating a document where you will know names of patrons, that probably can't happen until January. I can't think of any locality package that I've ever seen that has patrons listed, mostly because at this point, no one is able to introduce any legislation. At this point, legislators are requesting drafts of things, but until they actually, right, hit submit and put their name and it gets numbered and put on the record, I would hesitate to put anyone's name next to anything, right, until it's official. At that point, we will definitely have the names of patrons and bill numbers and very specific text for each of the different issues we talk about. And I would anticipate the city is going to care about a lot of different bills, and we're going to talk about a lot of different kinds of issues. So I think a lot of that meat on the actual legislative process that you're looking for, so that constituents know what we're following more closely and more about the conversations being had, I think that will start coming in January.
Thank you for that. I'm sorry, can I have one follow-up?
Yes, but I just want to get clarification on one thing that you mentioned in terms of transparency and community involvement engagement. You're talking about as we gear up for the next session, not in this, correct?
Exactly.
And
yeah.
having opportunity, okay, to create that.
Yes.
Yes, I want to
Yes.
make sure that.
And
Yes.
so, obviously our goal in this moment is to have something for this upcoming session. And I do want to express that I would really like to see more specific language around inclusionary zoning that reflects the language that was in the Richmond 300. So those are two things. But the other point I wanted to make is that I think the word patron may not have been the best choice of words. What I am suggesting is maybe that the requestor be noted, right? So not necessarily the person at the General Assembly. Obviously, that is a very transparent process, and that is very clear once that initiates. But so that we're clear on who's supporting which ones on this body. So I think that we might call those folks the requestor, and then you could see that there were 5 requestors or to support that, because there's some items on here that I'm not sure necessarily how they originated to be here, and without, since we haven't had public discussions, and much of the process has been through one-on-one conversations that the public doesn't have visibility to, nor the body, individual members of the body, it's unclear that whether or not these items truly do reflect the interests of the majority without any understanding of where how those came to be. So my request is that looking forward, we really revisit this process from the inside out so that there is real clarity on where these things are coming from. But even, I think, for the objective that the public has an opportunity to participate in this process, which they can't do if this is one-on-one discussions. It really should be, this is one of an important piece of legislation that this body takes. And so I think there should be as much more formality to the process to give it the respect that it deserves. And to ensure that we are really addressing those things that are priorities, both for the individual members of the body and in turn, the public that we serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gibson. And I'm going to look to RJ relative to creating that process in a way that also interfaces with our legislative persons and this entire body that gets articulated.
And in full transparency, I've just submitted a request to develop that policy.
Wow. Yeah.
So I'm, that is something that I'll be looking to collaborate with our policy team on.
Absolutely. And like I said, certainly we'll be looking to RJ to be point with that, with staff in communication with our lobbyists and in communication back with this body to have input as well. So thank you for that. Councilwoman Lynch?
Thank you. Yeah, 10-4 on that. And I was planning to kind of bring this up to the group and provide a little bit of historical context, which I think is important. In previous years, when we've developed our agenda, we've never really been held to or limited to the number of pieces of legislation or kind of priorities. Our predecessor, our former colleague in the 3rd District, passed a resolution limiting the number of priority items that we could put forward to the General Assembly. And I always question that just because for several reasons. One, I think we've confused the public greatly. I think we've also potentially confused the legislators in thinking that just because it's not on like the top billing page, that it's not a Richmond supported legislation or Richmond supported policy item. Certainly by having a little bit more, a broader kind of mission statement of policy positions, it leaves us room to both support coalitions that already exist that may be putting in, and this happens every year, where a legislator or an advocacy group may be advancing a specific policy that we in fact agree with, but may not have specifically requested a patron for. Things like broad sweeping policy changes, things like the loop, the inclusionary zoning, rent gouging, for example, the RHHA, the public housing protection bill that was put in last year. The ability to tax liquid tobacco, which I'll come back to in a second. We don't want to pigeonhole ourselves. I don't think that we do, to not support or oppose any piece of legislation because it's not explicitly stated on our packet. I think going in the direction where we have more, not less, but it's directional and kind of states our intent and articulates our position as a body allows us a great deal of flexibility and to be nimble. And I like, to Councilmember Gibson's point, if you want to get behind a particular policy and say, like, I stand for this and these are the reasons why, and then subsequently engage your district, like we've done on photo speed ticketing and some of the other bills that have come forward in the General Assembly that haven't explicitly been Richmond bills, but we have chosen to use that as an opportunity to engage our citizens on things that we know they care about. For example, the trees. I think that just puts us in a better position. Well-intended resolution that was passed however many years ago, I believe that was passed in 2023 by our former colleague. But I think now that we've gone through this, perhaps a better way is to revisit and have a, not really box ourselves in to these 5 pieces and to make sure that we are stating our positions. Now, I put the caveat on that. There are things that are very explicit and specific to the city of Richmond, like charter changes and budget amendments and budget requests for specific infrastructure projects that are very, those are going to be labeled as Richmond bills because they are very Richmond specific in the state code of Virginia. I think those are kind of separate and apart from what we support as policymakers and as policies that ultimately benefit our citizens. So I agree with you, Councilmember Gibson. I think taking a second look at that resolution that got us to this process is a good idea. I was also intending on putting in a resolution, but if you already got one filed, I'll get behind, whatever you got going on. But I do think that this has caused a little bit of confusion in the public. And I think that it's a good idea for us to take another review for this upcoming year.
Thank you, Councilmember Lynch. I think I've heard this from multiple members as a priority. And certainly, I think, we've had some conversation with our legislative person as well. So how we address that in this current iteration, but also as we look to move forward. So absolutely. Councilwoman Robertson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the work that you've done so far. We're looking forward to a very robust General Assembly session, which is nothing unusual. We usually are. I will say, though, that what we have before us as our requests that we're considering and that you've presented to us in this report is a lot more extensive than what we've done in the last years or so. And one of the challenges that we've been charged with previously is that we're only going to be successful with so many bills. And that is very important that that we make as a body, as Richmond legislative body, that we make some very critical decisions as it relates to, priority is probably not the appropriate word to do because all of these things are priorities. But we have tried to put together a more concise legislative agenda that we absolutely want to be sure that there are bills that we have patrons for that are introduced and that we are really we're using that invested time and energy to make sure that there are particular bills that we really, really want to see get through and that we have patrons and that will carry that through to us. When we have a legislative agenda, and previously what we've been confronted with is that when we have a legislative agenda with as many items as we have before us right now, typically what we have experienced is that council still come back to the table and say, okay, guys, we got to really focus on some bills that some of these legislative requests that we really, 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 really want to make this happen. And what happens in that process is that some of these things may doesn't have as much steam or energy behind them. And that becomes a little challenging for us to be able to make those hard choices. However, there are monetary assignments, attachments to each one of these legislation in some way or the other, some more so than other. And I know that the administration have talked to us about some legislation that they want to see done. I know that there are big ticket dollar items that we are under the gun to make sure, like, the combined sewer overflow, that is tremendous dollar amounts. And we've talked about other legislation as it relates to water and so forth that are big dollar items. And, 2 or 3 or 4 of those big dollar items can really water down how much energy the legislators, who also have limited number of bills that they can get, helping to make decisions. So I do think that it's important that, Madam Chair, as we move forward, we're talking about transparency and policy and names of council members individually versus council as a body, that we talk about those processes with some detail, and probably that's a work session for the body itself, even if we go through a committee process to come back with recommendations to get to a place. Time is not on our side, right now. But making sure that we are working through those processes that recognize those things that we really want to make sure that we absolutely get bills for, without a questionable doubt. And then how we can advocate to support probably everything that's on this list, to send that message that this council does support those, but recognizing what our capacity of how many bills we will be able to get patron and taken through the process would be important for us to make the right kind of decision. And I'm still looking forward to having a follow-up meeting with you as well, in regards to what is before us at the present time, as well as some other things that I'd like to discuss. And so hopefully, we are working on a date for that, RJ. So I'm looking forward to that opportunity. Thank you.
I'm looking forward to it as well.
Thank you.
I think one thing to keep in mind that kind of addresses something that all of you have said in different ways. As a city, we have a certain number of legislators that represent the city, and they only have, like you said, so much time and ability and political muscle, right? We all only have so much political muscle, political capital to spend. However, on a lot of these issues that other localities are also facing, we're going to see bills from other places, other parts of the Commonwealth. So one beautiful thing about keeping this, a large statement of principles on various issues is that we're going to have different versions of bills from different places that we can either support, oppose, or even go to a patron and say, I see what you're trying to do for your county, your rural county in this part of Virginia. If you also considered X, Y, and Z, you could potentially also have the support of the city of Richmond, right? So we're trying to build to kind of maximize impact, because we only have so many legislators we can ask things for. And the money asks on this agenda that the city needs are large, right? And will be significant.
Councilmember Abubakar?
Sure. I just, to Councilmember Lynch's point, I just wanted to get clarification and maybe your expertise around, like, what, we're talking a little bit around the topic of legislative priorities versus basically like what I would consider policy statements or policy priorities. What is the best practice amongst localities? Like, what do you see with other clients and how they're approaching a legislative agenda?
Sure, great question. I see it both ways. I think when you have something that is very specific to Richmond that really no legislator outside of the city of Richmond would ever pick up on their own, I think we need to be very specific about those and put them very clearly in the code. But a lot of things that the city of Richmond would be asking for would apply statewide or at least regionally, right? And so those are items that maybe we do have a wider audience that we can go to put a bill in or to support a bill. So I see it both ways. I would recommend this year with it's a newer composition of council. We have a new relationship where we're all working together in the spirit of collaboration. I think we're going to have a new administration, a new makeup in the General Assembly, hopefully not too much shakeup on committees that will directly impact you, but we will have some new members. I think keeping it vague is not the right word, but like high level principles, high level goals, a statement of principles, I think will be helpful, because there will be the nuances between two housing bills will be so slight. We might have to say, we like this one, we don't like that one. And so that's the hard work that comes in January. So if council decided to remove the limit of 5, I think that would be fine. I think a lot of localities do not, I can't think of a locality off the top of my head that has self-constrained themselves, but you have to be wary of the fact that you can only ask for so much, right? You can't ask for everything.
But if we were to kind of take the approach of thinking about this more in terms of policy, which sort of should be as a body, then it wouldn't really matter because there'd be buckets of, like, it's kind of organized that way now, but it's just it's got a little bit granular. Like, it would just be buckets of policy statements as opposed to the nuance of like actual legislation.
Right.
Okay.
I would not recommend putting specific legislative language, words from the Code of Virginia. I mean, perhaps if it was a charter change, because that is so specific.
Outside
right?
of like charter and.
Yeah,
Richmond's
outside of
budget
that.
varies. Yeah, okay.
I might not put specific language, code language, because in the end, it's up to a legislator to decide how best, the language looks. It might not look exactly the way we want it, but it might be just as good or better. That's the kind of the push and pull of working with the state delegation.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Devin, I know that we're going to have a fuller discussion on Monday. And Ms. Gibson, I'm coming to you, but one of the things you mentioned, and I think it bespeaks our at least preliminary discussion about regional collaboration and around issues. And so that's something to be mindful of, even whether it's the 9 that are within the Richmond region or couple 3, depending on what's up there, and just to be vigilant, because I think that will be really important as well. If it's not one of our top, whichever way we will define it fully next week, it's still a way of looking at supporting the legislation. So thank you. Councilmember Gibson?
Thank you, Madam President. And I appreciate this discussion because I think my understanding of this document, I think I misinterpreted the document. So as I'm understanding it now, there are 5 things that we have identified as requests. And if I'm understanding it, these are the 5 things that we are specifically asking our local delegation to draft policy for. And then the other things are just like, this is how we feel about a thing if someone else does it. So my concern is that no one else is going to ask for Richmond to have inclusionary zoning. And so if I'm understanding it correct, this draft is the way it stands right now. We're currently not asking any of the local delegations specifically to patron a paper regarding inclusionary zoning in Richmond?
No, let me correct one thing. I would say that just the way I approach this document is just because it's not on the first page doesn't mean we're not talking to your delegation and saying we would like to see a bill on this. I believe, and I wish I had looked this up, I believe Delegate Carr had an inclusionary zoning bill last year. When I sit with her at the end of the week, one of the first questions I will ask is, do you intend to include that bill again? It's still in the package. It still matters to the city. So it's not quite that black and white. I do think there's lots of stuff in our policy positions that our legislators might say, oh, I'm interested in this specifically. And they want to work on that. And it might not be in our top 5, but we still want them to work on it, right? So that's how I approach it.
Okay, that's helpful. So the question I guess I have, so, regarding like whether we have 5 or 6, for me, again, without seeing who requested which, it's unclear how we came to the 5.
Mm-hmm.
I personally, given the importance of affordable housing in this city in this moment in time, I personally would like to see inclusionary zoning as one of the top legislative priorities for this body, especially as we are entering a period of looking at our city building codes and zoning. And so I guess my question is for either our chief of staff or leadership. I would like to know what would be the process by which to amend this document, which again, like I'm not entirely sure who made the determination, what the 5 things were, but I'd like to know how could I introduce a version of this document for approval by this body that includes inclusionary zoning as one of the top priorities. And if that requires amending the resolution that was adopted by my predecessor to allow us to have 6, I'm certainly amenable to doing that if that's what the process is. But I am very much interested in including inclusionary zoning as a priority here.
Sure. First, this is not a finalized document. This is a draft. We will have opportunity on Monday for broader discussion and getting to finalization, including any additional items, because there are other members for whom inclusionary zoning would be a priority. I know that for a fact. And so we can talk about that as a part of that discussion next week. I'm not clear that given that it is, I am not clear that we would need to go through if this body agreed to put that item there, and I'll have to check with the city attorney, we should be able to do that, correct? Well, no, if we wanted to do more than 5, 1 to do 6 and 1 to add, what in this case is inclusionary zoning, but is that, I don't want to misquote, will not require paper. Will not require paper relative to the paper that was introduced that articulated that there would be 5. No.
Yes, the question is, the resolution that was adopted in 2022, setting the 5 limit, if we wanted to change that to 6 for this one instance, so we could get 6 items in there, would it require us to amend or introduce another resolution to amend the 5 request to 6, and then at the same time add 6 items?
Ms. Drury?
Yeah, that's fine.
So it does not require paper, or it does? To add whether 6 or 7, I don't know, in this case, it's an addition. Right, it's just a resolution. So it would not require a paper to say we can do more than 5 corrective. At the end of the discussion next week, there was a consensus agreement that folks wanted to have 6, or would it, is that correct?
I think, Madam President, it would be fine if there's a consensus for it because it's a resolution.
Thank you. Okay. Now I'm going to go back to Ms. Lynch. Any other question relative to that item that provides clarification for you, Ms. Gibson?
I would just like to understand what our process will be to determine the consensus.
We will be meeting next week. We'll have a fuller discussion to get to finalization, and Devin will have had opportunity to have discussion in the interim with all members that relative to this draft and where we are, any other items that people are similarly desirous of looking at, higher priority for, et cetera, and bring that back to the body.
I would say if there are gaps, something missing from this document or something that you think needs to be changed, go ahead and send those to me or send them to RJ and he'll get them to me so that we can make sure that we've included any additional specifics that maybe haven't made, that any gaps or any adjustments that you want to see to the document at this point.
Thank you.
And I think I'm coming back to this meeting next Monday for a fuller discussion.
That's correct. Much fuller discussion. Yes. Councilmember Lynch?
Okay. So, two couple things. One, I agree wholeheartedly with kind of, I mean, this whole discussion, it makes the case for why having this kind of, arbitrary 5 priority list just doesn't necessarily kind of jive with our process and how we've done it previously. I think it'd be prudent of us also to find out if there are other advocacy groups that are planning on asking any members of our local delegation to put in these, because I think that would be the case. I mean, there are advocacy groups and coalitions that are doing this work that are likely making asks of our same delegation. Again, this is why it's great for us to have the policy position paper to say Richmond supports this. We can go testify to it. We can, but like coordinating with the existing groups, I think would make a lot of sense. I'll say that one. Two, if we are opening up this document, I do want to add one. I mentioned it earlier. I do want to add one ask or request. And I do not think an existing group, well, I know an existing group is not working on this. And that would be the ability for Richmond to impose a tax on liquid tobacco. And so I would love to get consensus on adding that to this agenda, either as a priority request or a policy position. It doesn't matter, but because to me, again, I feel like we pigeonholed ourselves, but I do feel like that is an opportunity that we have this year to pursue that bill again, in light of some of the recent conversations that we have had in public safety around the vape stores and whatnot.
Thank you, Ms. Lynch. And I think if, Devin, you're going to be vigilant and outreaching to each of the members and any additional items that folks, so that we get that for discussion and decisioning on the 10th.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, so then if there are no other questions at this time, we will be prepared for a full discussion with any additional items that members have shared with Devin that gets put into a draft that comes out to members before the meeting on the 10th.
Yes.
So everyone can have that. And then that's where we would be doing the final decision.
We have been, the process we've done so far is to get the draft as good as we can and for it to be disseminated on the Friday before the Monday meeting. So you have the weekend to look at it and prepare your remarks if that works. Just know that tomorrow is like very busy day for people like me, so I will not be doing any legislative package work tomorrow.
I would appreciate Friday, but sooner would be okay
Sure.
as well.
Okay.
And I certainly, in
Yeah.
recognition of tomorrow, where we're encouraging everyone to get out to vote. But to the extent we can have benefit, certainly by the end of this week, of feedback of any additional items or the priority of items that are on that list for members, that would be helpful. So certainly not later than Friday.
Sounds good. Thank you.
I do want to say one parting word, and that is, while we have had a lot of discussion and back and forth, I want to appreciate two caps and specifically Devin's work for helping us navigate through all of this. It's not easy to deal with 9 members that have 9 different ideas of how things should be done, or that are walking into a process that was set before them and not necessarily have the leisure or the ability to change it to what makes sense. So you really stepped into this role and have been wonderful to work with and helping us kind of sort through all the dynamics that we have going on, not only with our process, but with all of our various very complex policies that we have as a local government. So I do want to say thank you for hanging in there with us.
No problem. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lynch, and Devin, thank you absolutely for your work to date, and look forward to the next iteration, the regional elements to the extent that makes sense, the strategic plan for each of us as we've identified which of our members will carry which pieces of legislation in our outreach to them as a body as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yes, members, and in relation to that, at the informal meeting next week, we currently have scheduled a code refresh update from Director Vonk, and then the homeless strategic plan update. Adding this on there, I don't want to have you all restricted in the conversation, so just as a heads up, we might have to move informal to 3 p.m. start to accommodate those three plus docket review. If there are no immediate objections, we'll proceed with that, but while everyone was in the room, I wanted to go ahead and share that.
And really wanted to make sure we could have substantive conversation about the legislative packet and get to the kind of decisioning on items. Some have been raised here that we're all looking for. So thank you. With that, I believe we have a presentation by our CAO, Mr. Odie Donald, in terms of the federal government shutdown impact update. Welcome, Mr. Donald.
Good afternoon, Council President and members of Council. Set up. All righty. Well, one, thank you for the opportunity to give you an update on the federal government shutdown and its continuously changing but ever increasing impacts on local governments, including the city of Richmond. What we have seen so far is that there is more than $1 billion in impact to the city. So about $1.1 billion in federally supported programs are at risk if these reimbursement delays continue of our total $3 billion budget. There are about 130 programs that are funded in some form or fashion. Of course, not all are completely federal funded, but those that have a portion of federal funding in them, it's about 130 programs. I say about because depending on the status of the programs, like we're not counting ARPA programs in this bundle. And so those are additional, programs as well. So we have about 13 programs that have been fully funded, have received all of their dollars, and the government shutdown is not impacting them. There are another 98 that if the impasse continues for a certain period of time, then they'll have to be at least partially or fully suspended. And then there are 19 that are 100% funded and will terminate their operations immediately without additional funding coming in. So the impasse at the federal level definitely has a local impact. Now, we'll focus today on two specific programs that have a really direct impact. And so before moving on, I want to do two things. One, just kind of thank all of the members of the administration who helped to contribute to and frame what this looks like for the city and to a certain extent the region for the recently published federal shutdown report that we have now published, made available to the public on the website, as well as distributed to all of you. It's the only one in the region, and it really does give a really strong snapshot of where the city is. So I want to give big kudos to our staff for doing that. In addition to that, we have some of our human services leadership here today, as well as Mr. Wiggins, who has been leading to help bring all of this information and data together. So before I move forward, I just wanted to acknowledge their continued work in a very difficult and ever-changing situation, which you'll even see on this slide. So number one, the Department of Social Services and the Department of Housing and Community Development have the most immediate risk to their service delivery based on this impasse at the federal level. And it's important to note that while we implement these services locally, this funding is received from the federal government, even if it passes through the state. So our ability to receive and implement these funds is really very strongly dependent on our federal partners. And it is changing this environment daily. I think we've had calls in between Friday and today, around 6 or 7 calls and another 20 emails, just trying to figure out, what is occurring. And just today, we got a little bit of good news. It's better than the gloom and doom we have been receiving, that the federal government has announced that it will pay 50% of November SNAP benefits. Now, not 100, it's definitely not what we desire, but it is a little bit better news because locally it means that the burden on us is a little less than expected. Moving right along, I won't go through each one of these programs, but here's just a snapshot of, if funds are not received, programs that would need to be suspended, what you'll have here. And again, some of this is in the shutdown report, but it is the department, the program, the funding source, the budget, as well as the population served. We also did the same for the programs that are at risk of suspension. And so you'll see those, again, just kind of taking a snapshot of these 2 service areas so that we're aware of what the impact would be. In some cases, it's extremely minimal. In other cases, it is, close to terrifying. So the city has basically taken this, how you say it's not our fault, but it is our problem. And so we have taken this problem that has been laid at our doorstep and really started to take on some initial mitigation activities. First, just fiscally, we've activated any bridge funding that is available, and we've deferred some discretionary expenditures to make sure that we can sustain operations and that our staff members have an opportunity to show up to work every day and continue to deliver services. Operationally, we prioritize critical DSS and HCD services for vulnerable populations so that those folks are able to access and are served first. And administratively, we focused on maintaining continuous coordination with our state and federal partners as much as we can, while also kind of connecting the dots here locally between our departments, social services, HCD, the overall human services cluster, as well as with our financial leaders so that we can track these changes that are occurring in real time as best we can. Again, I think I gave you the example that just today we got new guidance. And so trying to understand what that means and how it impacts our plan is something that changes not just from day to day, but really hour to hour. And I think the second piece is communication. So again, I highlighted, with the help of these leaders, we have started to just be proactive in our communication and let people know what is in tow. But in addition to that, using this platform, and thank you, Councilmember Jordan, for recommending that we come to the council today to provide this highlight so that the public could get a little bit more information and ensuring that it is as up to date as possible, including the changes that occurred today. But that's one thing that we want to do, not only communicating to our broader stakeholders, to you as a council, but also those recipients who are receiving these services. And as I'm hoping you read in our shutdown report, we have kind of stuck to our navigation framework, which includes 6 key areas. And while it's listed as number 6, it's probably the most important, and that is making sure that we communicate with everyone engaged and involved. I won't go through the 6. We've got them engaged and included in our document. And so I think everybody is aware of what they are, but we're in the process of updating these things now. In addition to that, as I mentioned, we have the updated Resilient Richmond report is what we're calling it, just to give people the overall framework and what these projected impacts are. And we'll continue to do updates to the council as you desire them, as well as in a public way through the press releases, our social media, and all of the other paths that we have taken so far. And so I'll today in this update kind of touch on three things: the Department of Housing and Community Development, how these changes at the federal level and these restrictions on funds are impacting our SNAP population, which I think you're hearing from around the region and the nation, but also how the impact of new SNAP requirements that went into place on Saturday. And thank you, Councilmember Gibson, for pointing out that would be good for the public to hear. We were able to include those with the additional time that the council gave us. We were able to include that in the report as well. So I'll touch on those three areas. For HCD, the snapshot is fairly simple and the news is fairly good. You know, right now, the way that HUD provides that funding, we have the bulk of our funding now, and so they have continued to provide reimbursements to date. And for the most part, our reimbursements are around FY25. And so right now, what we have started to do is just look at worst case scenarios so that we are prepared for any changes that may occur. I think the administration has made it very clear that of programs that are on the chopping block, along with sustainability, SNAP, and many of the others, HUD is one of those programs as well. So we're preparing for what it looks like if they were to make changes. So if HUD was to stop all reimbursements for federal programs, what we've identified is that CDBG, Home, HOPWA, and ESG programs collectively have around 63 programs between them, touches 33 agencies and 10 employees that would be directly impacted. We also know that HOPWA, which is one of our more vulnerable populations, supports around 102 households, covering everything from short-term rentals and financial assistance to permanent supportive housing and rental assistance. Again, with housing being a very crucial and vital cog in Richmond's ecosystem, we're paying very close attention to that. And then our ESG and CDBG subrecipients, we expected those cost of services would increase if they began to pull back the resources that they provide to us. And then I think, the piece that gets lost is around critical and substantial home repair projects that are in process now, and we prioritize them based on emergency or safety and funding availability. Just started to add some priority to those in case we have any issues, kind of a FIFO model, first in, first out. And so we've also given a snapshot of what that projected impact would look like, both fiscally, as well as just in the way that we do business. So about $500,000 average in monthly agency reimbursements across programs occur currently. And so that monthly reimbursement is a little bit under $75,000, and it covers HCD staff. 102 families could potentially lose housing that the city currently provides if the 140,000 average that we receive on a monthly basis is not able to be delivered to the three providers in which we contract with. That would also, again, if we didn't receive those reimbursements, that means that the cost to the city goes up because we pay those on the front end. And of course, it would impact those HCD properties where work has begun but is not being completed because, again, as we are reimbursed, we are also reimbursing others. So what we're doing is cautiously proceeding. Again, I think I told you that we've started to prioritize our services to make sure we're using that FIFO model, first in, first out, making sure that the programs that are already in queue are receiving funding, and then those that are coming to the pipeline, we are monitoring and allowing them to move forward within the process as we receive those dollars in reimbursements. We continue to process FY26 funds because we are early in that process. in those contracts, watching and leaning on our legislative leaders, including Ms. Morrison and others, to make sure that we kind of know what's going on and we're keeping an eye on things. And then also processing invoices for the 9 FY25 contracts that we currently have in place, and we've not had an issue yet. So again, we have the projected impact there is really the continued uncertainty right now is what we're experiencing, but currently there's no impact on the funds, and we know what it would be with a little bit of lead time. So we're monitoring those closely. And then there is also, again, for the FY26 implementation, currently there's no current impact because they are providing reimbursement, although we have received signals that, HUD at some point would receive reductions. We don't expect that to happen until well after the shutdown has subsided. Now, those things can change because we've seen a lot of unique activity from our administrative partners. But as of right now, those things are, we're kind of in a business as usual posture when it comes to those specific HUD programs. And again, for now. For the Department of Social Services, we're in a little bit different posture. So first, I think the rules around delivering these programs are a little bit different. So one, there are things that by law are required by both the Commonwealth of Virginia as well as the City of Richmond. For us, each locality must annually appropriate the sufficient amount of funding for these social services programs, and local governments must operate these public assistance and social services programs regardless of reimbursement timing. I think this is another reason why we really harp on having enough money in our rainy day fund and our piggy bank, because we're required by law to kind of front load those fees. And again, within the regulations, regardless of the reimbursement timing, we have to be able to pay those funds. When we look at the Commonwealth of Virginia, they also have a responsibility and probably a little bit more flexibility in meeting those than the city does. And so the Commonwealth must also reimburse localities for expenditures within the limits of state appropriations. So they don't have to go above state appropriations to provide these funds, but within what they have budgeted, they must provide us reimbursement. Now, it does not guarantee immediate payment during a shutdown, but it does mean they have to provide reimbursement. And so for that, we know that DSS must operate all of their core programs regardless of reimbursement delay, which means that when it comes to ensuring that we have staff to deliver, even similar to what we see at TSA, where folks are working without a paycheck, we have chosen not to go in that model, but by law, we have to deliver these programs. So we are hopeful that the impasse at the federal level ends soon and that the commitments that are required by the state are kept just as we plan to keep ours. A couple of things just to highlight. That grant-funded DSS staff will remain supported through the end of the year. We've prepared for that and, have made some internal decisions on how to be able to keep that movement going. In addition to that, the what I'll call good news that we've been receiving from the federal government as well as the state should allow us to do that. That doesn't mean that it won't be painless, but it does mean that we'll have the ability to do so. It also means, though, that we are responsible for that $3.6 million per month in in delivering these federal services with or without reimbursement. Thing here just gave a pretty high level look at DSS staffing costs and what the impact is based on 1 day, 1 work week, or a bi-weekly check, so that you're able to see what the city's costs are and how we end up covering those activities. And so on a daily basis, we're a little under $140,000 per day, which excludes overtime, special funds, payroll expenditures, and salaries for onboarded positions through 25. And so we haven't, because we have this information, and again, because the team has done such a good job in kind of preparing us and looking at how this would impact us, really under quite a bit of duress. I'm extremely thankful and happy to have the team that we have. We have started to implement some current mitigation activities and have a plan on what we do here in the future. And so the first thing we've done just internal to the department is implemented a hiring freeze. So not adding additional burden beyond what we have staffed now, which allows us to continue to pay our current leaders. So we have a hiring pause for anybody that's been vacated after the September 30th timeframe. There are a little under 30 positions that have been paused, and it basically gives us a week's worth of savings right off the bat. So that will again assist us in floating some of our obligations while we wait on these reimbursements. And again, I think the state of Virginia, which I'll go into in more detail, has also provided guidance on how they'll be reimbursing us as well. There are also some other areas that we're looking at for operational savings. And so delayed purchases on needed equipment for the DSS offices to ensure that, we're prepared to not only meet those needs, but ensure that we have cash on hand. So things like AV, scanners, technology, security cameras, and other things that we do need, but we also want to make sure that we're able to deliver services through people are some of the areas in which we've looked at and provided some slight delays. And that, of course, we look at put that along with the week savings together, that should be able to float us for a month. So I think this is just to highlight to you that we've made some small things, some small adjustments that you might not notice and that the public won't notice in service delivery, but it is having true impact on how we deliver service. And again, give all kudos to the staff for that. Now, one of the last resort activities is one that we don't want to do. So we do not want to end up in the position of, I keep using the TSA example, but it's not just them, it's the, excuse me. It's also those, and I'm forgetting the name, that actually help to navigate our planes into the airport or whatnot. So, those folks, again, going without a paycheck. There are others, when you have these required responsibilities, that folks have to show up to work, even if they're not getting paid. I think we have some ways to avoid that, and we plan on doing so later this week. We're still evaluating what some of our options are, but I think we have a plan that we'll be putting in place that will avoid some of those things. But those are not indefinite adjustments. And so at some point, if the federal government does not come forward with the resources that we need to implement federal programming, we have to make some difficult decisions. And that might include some short-term payroll and staffing adjustments that would be necessary on down the line. May also include extending the hiring freezes beyond federal programs to ensure that we're able to kind of cover some of these costs. And so we're looking at every tool within our toolbox to make sure that folks can continue delivering these valuable services, but they also can earn a paycheck while doing so. And so our SNAP resources and programming is something that we wanted to kind of double down on, because it's one that I think around the nation folks are just really concerned about and really pushing in to make sure that we have these various models, even, throughout the Commonwealth, on how folks are going to deliver services. So the first thing is more than 22,000 households and about 38,000 Richmonders receive these SNAP benefits. That's almost 20% of our population relies on this assistance. That is a big chunk of our population. And this is just the first scrub. The data changes from time to time and needs to be refreshed, but our most dependable data gives us this information, and it lets you know the severity of the issue. In addition to that when we really kind of laser in on it and give that laser focus, about 10,000 students receive SNAP benefits, which also means that multiple meals, they eat more with us than they do in their homes. So that is a very important resource that we have to make sure that we provide to our youngest and most vulnerable residents. And with that, we are not alone in this challenge. Almost 175,000 recipients across Central Virginia are in this same boat. And so, again, a challenge for us for sure. And so this challenge is occurring and happening at the same time that the federal SNAP work requirement changes are going into place. So starting November 1st, and I want to make sure I illuminate these challenges because they are some that become very severe when you think about what is occurring with the shutdown. First, the age. So before, if you're 55 and older, you were exempt. Now that age limit is raised to 65. So that means that these new requirements now hit a 10-year window of people who have not had to deal with this over the time period that they have been receiving this service. Families before a household, including a child under 18, was exempt. Now that age drops to 13. And so again, people who have to, endure these new work requirements, or not endure, we'll say abide by these new work requirements, changes dramatically. In short, there are fewer automatic exemptions, and so these groups no longer are automatically exempt. And so it becomes very challenging for people who are chronically homeless or folks who are are not at technically a working age in most traditional environments. And so if you're chronically homeless, though, you can still be exempt. But I mean, what happens to the person that is couch surfing or in between, opportunities and having challenges and unable to find work for other reasons that might go from incarceration? I mean, there are tons of examples and opportunities. So it creates a real challenge there. These new rules will apply when your case is reviewed or renewed, which is a little glimmer of hope for us in implementation during this time, because the hope is that there are not a ton of these cases that are being reviewed or up for renewal within what we hope to be a short shutdown. Until then, the current exemption status does remain the same. And if your situation changes, whether it's work hours, somebody new living with you, or your case might have to be reviewed a little bit sooner than normal. And so it is also in the midst of these challenges where we're all having to work together in new ways. It kind of feels like there's a restriction on our most vulnerable populations and having the abilities to do the same thing. The state and local response to the shutdown comes at the same time that these things go into effect. I think I talked to you about the federal government's response, and so that is very new. It is today. Only bring you information that the federal government has made a commitment for 50% of funds in November using their contingency. And so we do know that some form of help that we did not believe was coming is on the way. And so we are thankful for that, because that gives us a little bit relief within our plan. But here is how we're responding. So, not speaking on behalf of the Commonwealth, but for what they have made public, they have launched the Virginia Emergency Nutrition Assistance Program, otherwise known as VENA, and it starts on November 3rd. And so recipients, of course, knowing that, they will receive or face some food benefit gaps and some reduced purchasing power, which I'll highlight here shortly, due to the new structure. They have taken on a weekly payment structure so that it is in alignment with the government shutdown and its shortened time frame. City of Richmond, of course, to fill in the gap. What we've done is what y'all have done since you've been here and long before I've got here, and that's partner with others. And so we have connected with our partners at Richmond Public Schools, Feed More, and regional partners to implement some food distribution and outreach activities while we continue to explore a few other things that, again, I said we'll be highlighting and enacting later in the week. When we look at VENA, just the total statewide weekly allocation is a little under $38 million, which again is a fraction of what was provided previously. Weekly payments will be 25% of what a participant would get monthly. They would also have the same eligibility requirements as SNAP, so it does make that process, or is intended to make it a little bit easier. And participants approved to receive SNAP prior to October 29th will also receive VENA. So again, that is a streamlined process, which I do believe is helpful. And those payments will continue through November unless the federal shutdown ends, and then things should go back to status quo. But the one thing that I think I warned before the shutdown was enacted and definitely through the shutdown is that things get clunkier as they get higher. And what I mean is if the city of Richmond shuts down for 30 days, it might take us a month or two to get back to normal. If the state shuts down for 30 days, might take them 3 or 4 months to get back to normal. Federal government shuts down for 30 days, it might take them up until a year. It gets much more difficult as you go up because they have to send those funds down. And I think today, some of the things that we've heard from national news reports and things of that nature highlight that they have not committed to provide a full level of funding for upwards of a year. So we should be prepared for that. Here is just a snapshot of the VENA payments and structure and timing. While I won't go through that, in great detail, I just wanted you to know, because I know you asked for this specifically, Councilmember Gibson, we have been notifying our partners as well as our team has been on regional calls. We've kept our participants in the know as well as all of those who we'll be partnering with. Now, I also have to be honest, that is not a perfect environment to deliver information because, again, as you saw, even today, it is changing. And so we are doing the best that we can in a very difficult situation. But again, Richmond is ahead of the curve on releasing reports, notifying people, as well as even providing, just recently made a connection with the state of New York and Director Giles, who is looking at us to get more information and details. So as always, we're trying to be the market leader when it comes to helping folks. In addition to that, food distribution partnership, just wanted to share some details on what we're doing there. So to address this, and again, I probably shouldn't be calling out these leaders by name. I'll just say the human services cluster, because this team has stepped up and really, put their capes on to make sure that those folks who need these services have been in a position to receive them. And so we are prepared to address this through Feed More. We partner with our teammates from Henrico and others and increased their power, their purchasing power, and ensure that where our residents and participants are lacking, folks will have another outlet to be able to receive these services, this needed food, and to do so in places that they are very familiar. And so our process is quality and in place. We'll be evaluating it on a weekly basis, but we feel like we're in a very strong position to begin in these uncertain waters. Again, I want to make sure not going to be perfect. This is not something that happens every day. It is a complete shock to the system. So if you get a call, please pass it along to us. But know that these folks are working extraordinarily hard, and many of the people who have to deliver these services are in a position where they're a couple of checks or phone calls away from joining the other side. And we want to make sure that we not only provide a safe space for them, but an easy way for them to deliver these much needed services. With that, again, included some additional information around this centralized school market process and other things for you to be able to read about and, have knowledge when your many constituents call you as kind of the tip of the spear for us delivering. And as we make some final decisions to be able to ensure that we fortify our position, the council will be our first stop in providing that information. And in talking about that information, that's kind of the key. I know that I said it was last, but one of the most important things, communicate, communicate, communicate. And so we've been focused in our outreach, everything from printing postcards in various languages to making sure that we're partnering with the state. I get an email probably about 3 times a day from Ms. Giles about her coordination, both on the regional and the state level. It's quite interesting, again, new guy, I hear all this stuff about what Richmond doesn't do, but boy, when folks want answers to something, we're the first people they call. We should, take great pride in that because we are leading the region's response in a very difficult situation. And with that, I think we've also, I've heard from the council and I'm very clear, transparency, transparency, transparency is a big part of communication. And so we have been leveraging our website as much as possible, as well as I know you have seen social, and I don't have to go through all the details of that. But for SNAP specifically, because it is really, the most vulnerable of vulnerable populations, we do have our information online and we are updating it continuously. So it is go.rva.gov/SNAP. We'll take you to all of the information. And what we'll also do is start posting these presentations and links to the shutdown report and all of the other information that we'll be putting out into the community. Now, one thing I know that I've heard from every council member is, how can I help? And so that is an extraordinary thing that I think is unique to Richmond. So first, want to thank you for that, and also, share a few different ways. One, we've got to bring attention to, no matter how much money we give and what type of partnership we have, our pockets are not able to really fill in the gap for everyone. And so donating food is important, very important. I saw, I'm on a national group where city managers and administrators from around the country talk. And one of the things that we are encouraging our elected officials to do is, donate from your campaign and encourage others to do so, even if it's small amounts, because there are certain things that a city cannot do, but that elected officials can. And so that's an opportunity that we've seen mainly in the bigger cities and the larger roles like mayors, governors, and others to kind of lead that work. But, every little bit counts. So I think that is one way. One thing that we're going to need help with, there are not enough volunteers to really kind of help here. So I think we're all looking for ways to roll up our sleeves. I don't know if y'all noticed yet, I love my sneakers and my polos and my jeans. And so I'll be out there along with our staff, putting on aprons or whatever else is needed to be able to donate time and help to volunteer. Encourage everyone else to do that. That's not necessarily for the council, because I know y'all do those things anyway. But for the rest of our audience, that is also important, because you can imagine that the lines will be extraordinarily long. The more hands we have on deck, the better off we're going to be. And then, also, again, I mentioned, donations. I think individually, when we can, we have a responsibility to. And so we want to make sure that we can do that as well. And from the city's coffers, I think we have a plan to do so as well. With that, I know there was a lot of information in a short period of time. I again want to thank you for allowing us the opportunity to present the many actions that we're taking on. We're not done yet. The situation is definitely changing daily, and unfortunately, it does not seem to be a solution in sight, just to be honest about that. And so while we wait for the folks at the federal level to make some type of decision that benefits us here locally, we are intent on doing our part. With that, I'll take questions, and depending on how specific you get, I may end up calling some of my teammates up to assist.
Thank you, Mr. Donald. And there are questions. But first, I want to say thank you to you and to your team for the incredible responsiveness in this circumstance and being mindful of how our residents are being impacted and the level of stress, distress. And so the more communication, the quicker we can provide it. Always the best scenario. So thank you. Councilmember Gibson.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Mr. Donald, for providing a comprehensive overview in terms of what the short term could look like given the circumstances. I have a couple. Well, one note. It's my understanding that where we are in this moment, it's a combination of both the federal shutdown and the changes that are incorporated in one big beautiful bill. And I think it's important that that distinction is made because as we think about the shutdown, I mean, as Americans, we've been through some shutdowns before and they feel temporary. Obviously, the circumstances may be different this time, but with the implications on one big beautiful bill, those are not temporary. That's the way it is now, and I believe, well, I am certainly not an expert on one big beautiful bill, that the work requirements are not temporary changes as a result to these are permanent changes as enacted by one big beautiful bill.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that it's important for folks to understand that. And I think that there is, since those went into effect November 1st, I feel a sense of urgency to make sure that the public is aware.
Okay.
And so one of the questions that I have for you, one is what we're doing as a city to help connect Richmonders to employment and job training, given those new requirements. I'm curious, I just wanted to get clarity on whether the work requirements will also be applicable under VINA, the same work requirements that are now incorporated in SNAP. And I want to understand what the direct outreach that the city is doing with residents. Like I know in New York City, they're contacting every individual to let them know those that are going to be impacted by this. So folks that are 55, 65, families that have children that are 14 and up. I'm wondering what that looks like. And, as we're talking about ways that our offices can help, certainly, our office is looking at, getting food donations and things like that. But I think that, I think there's, critical interest in what can we do to make sure that we get the word out, especially given that these changes have such widespread implications and are not going anywhere regardless of the shutdown.
Yeah, so I do want to separate the two, and I think you did a good job of starting that for me. So while they are separate from, and I'm always cautious to call anything federally enacted permanent. It's the same way as the tax code, which is coming up for reauthorization. It's the same way that and it wasn't, I actually hate the name Big Beautiful Bill, but the previous infrastructure bill that was introduced by the previous administration, had some pretty strong changes and actually removed quite a few requirements. This new offering kind of undoes some of that work and adds in new things. So some of it is, hey, elections have consequences, and some of these are things that we'll have to deal with during this administration. And so they go into effect regardless of the shutdown, is how I would just prefer to say it. And so there are a variety of things that we're doing, and I touched on them. I probably should have went through them in a little deeper, but presentation was long and comprehensive. But everything from telephone calls, which you highlighted, postcards that we also highlighted, but we're also looking at adding some additional communications. We will be providing food resources, which allows us to coupon. Are you familiar with couponing and basically leaving information? I hand you a bag of non-perishable items, but also put details around everything from workforce development opportunities to details on what certain requirements are and resources that you can receive from the city and other places. So we're still putting some of those things together because this crisis also serves as an opportunity for us to be able to provide information and be direct to consumer in a way that we would not have before. The other piece, looking at best practices, so New York has not done this, but Baltimore did under their CA Faith Leach, who I used to work with, put together a temporary call center expansion, which we're also looking at. Now we're also talking about a place that has double the amount of residents and a much larger budget. Same thing with New York. So we're trying to figure out what we are able to do. But some of the hand-to-hand combat and notifying folks, we've already started. And more to come later this week on what we're also doing. Yes, ma'am. Oh, I don't know how y'all do that.
Okay.
It's just one other question
Okay.
is regarding Medicaid. If you could just talk a little bit more specifically about what residents might expect. Does this mean, are they still going to be able to get their prescriptions filled? Are they still going to be able to go to the doctor? Just over.
Yeah, so Ms. Giles, if you don't mind giving some more details on Medicaid specifically. Add somebody to the hot box.
Excuse me. Good afternoon, everyone. Shonda Giles, Director of Social Services. Right now, I guess the good news is Medicaid is required to be federally funded through a shutdown. So I don't anticipate any changes for recipients right now of Medicaid. It's something to keep in mind as this is prolonged because, again, I've never navigated this scenario before.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lynch?
Well, thank you. And Councilmember Gibson asked a question about outreach, and just to kind of put a further point on it. It's super hard, as you know, and challenging to communicate with our community members, particularly those on SNAP. We have a lot of transient community members, a lot of folks who do not have a permanent address. And I know in talking with several families over the weekend, they were largely unaware of some of the changes. Folks kind of just know that SNAP is getting cut, but I think some of the specifics around the work requirement, and then additionally what the impact will be to them as far as what they're going to lose in their monthly SNAP benefit, is really kind of murky and hard to communicate. So what are we doing to do some outreach on text message, where we have phone numbers, where folks have any type of email, and then obviously a good communication channel is our MCOs, because they have the most recent up-to-date contact information for a lot of our folks. I guess I'm wondering what are we just using direct mail? Because if so, can we look at
No,
the
we're
other
not.
options? Okay.
So we probably be better off just getting you a high level of everything that we're doing. So we're not just doing everything at the city of Richmond. So we're partnering with the state. The state is doing text messages direct to all of our constituents. We're also looking at, our ability to also, the messaging might be different. Let me say this the right way so I don't get in trouble. Messaging between that the state provides and that we provide, both would be lawful, but we might, in our text messages and our communication, might give additional information through our processes. So we're just looking at what else we can do. But the state, along with the city, is doing text messages. We're doing postcards. We're also including, I call it couponing, as we provide our food and resources. We're also making calls to those residents, and as folks call in to us, we're being responsive. So the two-way conversations going back and forth. So no, it's not just emails, which is not the best way to communicate with those folks who are currently receiving SNAP benefits. We're using a variety of different ways. And we're leaning on our state and county partners who are doing the same.
I would encourage us to use, I'm looking at some things that folks have sent me on the free everything RVA page, and I just counted like 12 folks who are asking questions about, where they can help. And
we'll make sure.
say, let's
we
try to blast
have
it
the
out.
RVA. I keep forgetting the name of it now, and I was just talking to somebody about it in our morning meeting, but how we send out messages that way. So there are a variety of things, but also if you have those suggestions, feel free to send them directly to me and copy our director and our Rockstar DCAO, and we'll make sure to take all of those things and utilize them appropriately. There's never enough. Anything that you can think of, especially those things that don't cost us a ton of money, that just help us with direct communication, we'll receive it all and open to do any of it. Yeah. But I also want to reiterate, not going to be a perfect process. We're learning as we go. I think the director, who has some really impressive experience, can tell you she hadn't had to deal with this before. This is my third shutdown. I'm a little older than I probably look. I think I still got it. But, I will tell you, it's the third time. Each time is different, and they seem to be getting a little bit longer. I mean, we are quickly approaching the longest period ever, which means none of us, no matter how old, how young, we are and what our experiences are, we haven't dealt with this. And I think it is very valuable what you said about what's on our website and the feedback. But one part of it, we have to understand, everybody's not technology savvy, and so we have to be able to reach those that are and aren't, but also some of it is, and rightfully so, our residents are afraid because this is uncertain. They have not seen this. Many of folks have not had to deal with this before, so we're trying to figure it out just like they are. But duly noted, and we'll take that back.
Vice President Jordan.
Thank you so much, CEO. Really appreciate this. And without going on a huge rant, I'm furious. I'm just furious that we're in this position. And when I look at the slide where you had the 6 actions we were taking, and advocacy was one of them. I hope, to the extent legally that we join any other lawsuits, we're doing that, because to release just 50% is not the full 100 that the judge told the Trump administration to release. So, and then feeling, uncertain about whether or not when we go after the bridge funding, or we use bridge funding, are we going to get reimbursed in time? This all has expense to the city, into our staff, into our residents. So I just want to say I'm incredibly grateful for you and everyone who is helping navigate this. But the fact that we're asking residents to donate to make up for what the federal government should be doing just makes me furious. Thank you.
Fully agree.
Councilmember Robertson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Donald. Thank you to your entire team, to the city's team.
Our team, that's right.
Yes, to all of us. What an unfortunate time to be in to face such devastation
Yeah.
and the demand and the things that are being targeted that will not be. You may have said something about this and I didn't hear you clearly, so I apologize up front if you addressed this and I missed it. But I sent some emails to you guys maybe last week about many of our nonprofits that are providing, essential services. I mean, they are part of the backbone of keeping the city functioning. And we're aware that many of their funding has just been cut. I mean, they're not getting any funding that provide essential services. And of course, housing always is one of those crises that if persons that we are providing subsidies or we're receiving a significant portion of their revenues from the federal government, and they've just been without it since July 1st. And they are at a place that they've used every option that is at their fingertips to try to not put people out on the street and have to shut down. And some of them are even at the state of, whether or not they're going to be going into foreclosures, as well as people that have lost their jobs. I mean, if we go, 3 months without paying your mortgage, you're subject to foreclosure. So we're really wanting to know whether or not there's a larger conversation that we need to be having with this. I know if this comes to an end, all of this won't be necessary. But some folk are already in July, August, and September that are already 3 months behind and are subject to be confronted with things like foreclosure and eviction. Whether or not there's any state emergency kind of housing policies that we can at least put a freeze on some things or something to prevent, because, we can talk federal, we can talk state, but all government is local.
Yeah.
And so it'll end up on our doorstep. I'm not asking you to tell me that you have or have not. I just want to put that out there and have a larger conversation about some really additional housing crises that are already at that November 1st deadline, and folk are out of money. They're completely out of money. And I'm really fearful as to what kinds of consequences that is. And I don't know that the state, the General Assembly, or others can put some freezes in place that are temporary. We can monitor it on a monthly basis or whatever. But I think some of the providers are willing to do what they can do even without revenue. But they can't afford loan foreclosures and those kinds of things as a part of it.
Well, so we're looking at that situation right now, and hopefully this week, towards the end of the week, I'm not going to say which day or whatever it is, but we're working on trying to find an interim solution that is within the city's power to be able to provide relief. As you mentioned, it is a complicated situation. It made my quick notes. At the same time that folks are facing layoffs, which means that they're not receiving the funding resources that they normally would, and we'll call them the renter population. That group now is someone that, again, is within our city that we have a responsibility to. At the same time, you have the owner who has a property, who is providing a place and needs their rent payments as well. And so how do we resolve that issue when both of these folks are equally in need of services for something that, again, is not their fault, but is their problem, the same situation that we're in? So I believe that we have a temporary resolution kind of continue to frame some of those things over the weekend and partner with some other jurisdictions through the national network of administrators. And I believe that we have something that we can bring back that will be helpful towards the end of this week. I mean, again, things are changing daily, but I believe we have something that we'll be prepared to announce and put into place. So. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Councilmember Jones?
Thank you so much, Mr. Donald. I have
Yes, ma'am.
2 questions for you. The first is you mentioned the way that we are communicating and messaging, but I'm a little concerned, or maybe you already addressed this, but how are we ensuring that residents are not getting misinformation? Because specifically when we're talking about seniors, we already know that there's a high volume of folks already preying on them. And so how do we know that what we're getting, the information that, how are we making sure that the information that they get is the right information? And while I know we can't control all the threats that will come, that's my concern, because I know that, you know, we necessarily don't have the capacity to make sure to do both. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. But like that's my first question, concern. And then my second question is, we know that when we do have crisis with the city, whether it's the family crisis fund or any type of like additional grants and funding that we give out, we know that a lot of times a lot of people can't get through. A lot of people can't necessarily get a response back. We only had like 2 people working on, how are we expanding that process to ensure that when people go to that website, one, they can get the information, and if they call, they're going to be answered and responded to in a timely manner. And so I just was concerned about those, because I know capacity a lot of times is our challenge. And so nothing new has changed because we're not hiring new people.
Right.
So how are we doing with what we have to ensure?
No, so both great questions. And look, I say this, and I say it because I need to make sure that we set expectations, that we can't do everything, right? But we're going to try. I mean, that's just the reality of it. We're not going to just take these difficulties on the chin and say, hey, we couldn't get it done. We just didn't have enough capacity. But we should be clear that that is true. We don't have unlimited capacity or unlimited resources, but that's not an excuse to not do everything within our power. And so I'll do your second question first, which was, what do we do with those limited funds that we've already added, and try to add capacity? I think the Feed More opportunity is one where we've kind of expanded their capacity a little bit in line with our partners in Henrico, and is also kind of focused on some short-term relief in line with what we hope is short-term with the government shutdown. Similar to what the state has done, regardless of how you feel about it, they have provided a pathway. I think we'd all want more than 25%, but they have to manage their coffers just like we have 2 hours. And so layering what the state is doing, what now the feds are doing, and what we're doing. So we've kind of taken on, at least for now, again, more information to come. We've got to figure it all out. But we have expanded the ability to ensure people have meals and can access those activities. So expanded the capacity along with our partners in the region. And so if that model works, we should be able to utilize it in other areas as well. But what we don't have the ability to do is just throw tons of monies at things like a Houston with 2.7 million residents, or DC with 700,000 residents. We're not that large of a municipality, and our framework doesn't allow us to do everything. So that is one. And then for your second question, I think, so you hit on that, had a brief conversation with Director Brill, who I have to actually, after this, reach back out to and follow up on, because that's the part that there is no way, which is, we have to have some targeted comms to our seniors and to those vulnerable populations, and then figure out what we do, even with our homeless populations, many of those who can be taken advantage of as well, because they have social security numbers and identifying information and, might be eligible for certain benefits as well. So we have to make sure that we educate them all. So targeted communications is one of the ways, and then finding out if we have the capacity to augment in a way. And I don't remember which one of you mentioned New York, but similar to what, and I'm sorry, I talked about Baltimore and what they did. I think their call center 2 more people or something of that nature. So do we have the ability to do something like that? And what does a declaration do, defining it as an emergency? We're looking at all of those things.
So,
One follow-up. And you may have mentioned this as well,
Yes,
then,
ma'am.
and then just to add to that, as far as our undocumented folks, like I
Mhm.
know you mentioned that, the messaging will be in multiple languages, but as far as those folks that are undocumented, we don't necessarily know where you are or who you are, will there be messaging at a minimum to say, hey, you can come to this if you
The short
desire?
answer is yes. And, the how we manage our undocumented residents and provide support to them is a very tricky situation. And so I think we want to be able to help and provide services to as many people as possible. And we're being thoughtful on how to do so. But messaging is universal, is the best thing that I can say there. And we're making sure that it is as inclusive as possible. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Donald, I want to say thank you. There is, especially going back to Councilmember Robertson's comment around housing, some
Yeah.
pretty dire situations for large numbers of persons. And I've certainly had some brief conversation with the mayor. We just happened to be at an event where this was shared, and I know he's going to be rounding wagons, and Councilwoman Robertson, I'm pretty sure, is aware, but we have a lot of situations where the funds have already been clawed back, or I should say, certainly haven't been provided. So thank you for your attention there, and look forward to, hopefully before the week is out, responses to some of those items.
Madam
So,
President, just a
yes.
point of personal privilege. I've done it a couple of times, but I did just want to highlight, especially since we have these leaders sitting with us today. I mean, look, we've had I'm a nice guy and all of that good stuff, but we have been in these rooms having some animated conversations. It's not easy. It's tough. And I just want to highlight that regardless of how we turning up the heat, our leaders have, continued to mold into something that's delivering some excellent results for our residents. We don't have all the answers. We have not figured it all out, but the reason we're ahead of the curve is because of them. And I just want to make sure to highlight that.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank each of them again as well. I know some are not present here, I don't think, but really greatly appreciate all of the efforts to date and all that you will continue to do in this regard. So thank you.
Thank
With that, members, we have one last agenda item, the reports of standing committees. And you have been in receipt of updates from council staff on all standing committee actions from October. So unless there are questions uh, um, or supplemental remarks from the committee chairs, um, we will move forward with concluding this meeting. Excuse.
Elections have
no,
consequences.
no.
You had to
I just
vote.
want to make sure if there are no members' desires. With that, members, thank you. This meeting now stands adjourned.